What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Neon Dream Games. And this week, I've got a devlog for you to update you on where I am in my game design journey. So, as I said, I have a bit of an update for you on where I'm at in making my first releasable game. Last time I talked about that I had an idea for a lane defense game, sort of like Plants vs. Zombies. And I have now had, I believe, around 15 to 20 hours spent into working on sort of the prototype of the game, or whatever, the bones of it, if you will. And I will show some footage here. Basically, it's going to be sort of a fruits versus veggies thing. And in fact, that might be the title. I'm still thinking about it, but I hope to have a Steam page up for it by the next devlog, which I don't know, might be in a couple weeks. I just want to get a smidge further along and feel confident in the direction I'm going in the game. But let's talk about some of the pitfalls and what's been going on. So I've had a lot of doubt going into just starting this, like just trying to think, do I have the capability to make this game? I had no idea where to even begin to make it. That's the big difference, like between like watching a tutorial and having to make your own game, is to just like, where do you start? So once again, as I keep saying on this channel, I used AI to ask, where do I begin on a game like this? And it suggested that I start with a background, maybe a simple basic level design, and then work on placing a couple basic units into that level. So that's what I did. I made a background. You'll probably see that here. I started with 2 units. So I wanted to start with a veggie unit, and I've kind of created tiers of units that you'll come across as you go through the game. So I'm starting with these basic units. I have an onion, and that onion just has a basic move and attack. And then an eggplant, which I didn't know, but an eggplant is a fruit. So the eggplant throws projectiles down the lane, and that's kind of where I'm working on. That's where I've gotten to at this point, and I almost had that fully operational, but I'm thinking about possibly starting over in a sense, because I am starting to learn about state machines, and I'm trying to figure out if a state machine would work out well for my scenario. So I'm thinking about going kind of back to the drawing board with it and seeing if I could set up a state machine to do the same things. But yeah, I mean, I had some real doubts again about my ability, and I almost scrapped this idea as well. But then I just buckled down and started to dig into it. And it's fun when you do start digging into it and you start to feel like you're getting in a groove. But to begin with, I had no idea how to work with like a grid. So I had to figure that out. That was one of the first things I had to do, like figure out where can I place a unit on the grid. And that took me a little bit. I had to watch a few tutorials, had to work with ChatGPT to understand the code, but I finally kind of understand the code. I got it in place. I think I'm going to have to tweak it a little bit. I did it in code, which is probably the better way to do it, but I was debating about using markers, like a marker 2D, which I did use to spawn the onions. I used marker 2Ds to just be the starting point for spawning in, and I can randomly pick one of them to spawn an onion, and that onion will then just walk down the row. But the eggplants, they had to be able to be placed on a grid, and I'm still working on that. So I've got the system in place where they can be placed, and I wanted to use marker 2Ds because that's sort of more a visual representation. I think it would almost be easier to code, but then it was like I'd have to have, I can't remember, something like 50 something marker 2Ds to be tracked, which probably doesn't take up too many resources, but it seemed like a lot. So I don't know what the best practice is. I ended up going with a coding version for now. We'll see if I stick with it. One thing that really sort of slowed me up too was that I wanted to think ahead as much as possible. I wanted to make choices now that would hopefully be beneficial in the future, so I wouldn't have to go back and redo code and stuff. But as I just said a little bit ago, I might go back and redo things to make a state machine, or at least try. And I guess it's better to do it now than later, just because that's sort of what I'm saying is I want to try and future proof myself so I don't have to do a massive amount of changing things and going back into code later because I realized something was better. Like one example that I do think I made a good choice on was handling the sprites. So in Godot, you have the Sprite 2D nodes, but obviously I have animations with the sprite sheets and stuff that I have. So I was like, should I put them in an animated Sprite 2D node or an animation player to handle the animations? Everybody says the animation player is more powerful, but do I need it? And in the end, I set up each animation on an animated Sprite 2D, and then I use the animation player to handle those sprites, which seems redundant, but it turned out because the sprite packs that I was using for the onion in particular, it had a hop more than a walk. So it just sort of hops down the lane. And I wanted it to pause as it hopped so it looked more realistic, where it's, gonna take its time between each move. So it's not just like hopping and sliding. And I was like trying to figure out how to do that. But then I thought, well, the animation player, you can essentially animate all kinds of parameters. So I animated the speed into the frames. So when the frames are up, that, when it's touching the ground in the frame, I have the speed set to 0. So it's not going to move. And then when it starts to hop, I give it more speed. So it has the velocity to move forward. And I really liked how that worked. And that's a good use of the animation player, I think. So that was sort of just one of those future thinking, like I'm sure I'm going to come into the need to use that more. In fact, I had to use it for the eggplant. I was getting all these weird graphical glitches with my sprite sheet for it, and it was like offset in a weird way, and I tried forever to figure it out, and I just couldn't get it to work right. So I animated an offset to make sure that the sprite lined up for all the different animations. So those are some examples of problems I had and how I solved them so far. Then it came time for me to work on the projectile for the eggplant. Basically, it throws an egg. I mean, it's sort of silly, but that was what was in the asset pack, and I liked that. I want this game to be kind of fun and lighthearted in that sense, but doing the projectile was a bit tricky for me, trying to figure that out. It just took a little trial and error, but in the end, I was able to implement that, and I just got it, doing damage, and now I'm tracking health on the characters. I did have an issue that I ran into where you could place an eggplant in a cell outside the bounds. Like you could click on the area above the grid or to the left of the grid, and it would place an eggplant into the grid, but like just below or to the right. Anyways, without seeing it, and it's hard to explain, but I couldn't figure out why it was doing that. So I ended up explaining the problem to ChatGPT. I pasted my code in there, and within a matter of moments, it said, well, here's the problem and here's how to fix it. So I punched in that code, tested it out, and sure enough, it fixed the problem. So that's just a good example again of working in tandem with AI to help you get through your issues. I mean, in the past, I suppose I would have had to have gone on to some forum and pasted my code there and asked why this was happening and wait to see if somebody would respond and if their response was even the correct response. So with ChatGPT, you can just fly through it, but you do have to have some knowledge, I suppose, of coding and things and what's going on, because it's not always perfect. And sometimes I have to I say, hey, this function doesn't exist, or this method or whatever, and it says, oh yeah, in version 4.3 it's been changed. It's like, well, why didn't you just tell me that? I've told ChatGPT to remember that I use Godot 4.3, and when at all possible, give me the latest examples or terminology, but it still sometimes throws in stuff from the past, yet it seems to know the correct terms, because when I call it out, it updates it. So that's a weird little quirk with it, but as long as you kind of have your own base knowledge of what's going on, I think it's a great way to work in tandem and solve some of your problems that you have when they arise. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm at right now with the game. Still early in development. I have no idea how to gauge how long this game is going to take for me to make. I'm still hoping the scope is within the scope that I wanted it to be, to release it by the end of the year. But, I guess we'll see as I progress further. As I said, kind of my goal for the next time is to have a Steam page set up for this game. I'd like to start collecting wish lists if anybody's interested, and, kind of prepare for a launch later this year, hopefully. But that's where I'm at. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, suggestions, anything, leave it in the comments, and hopefully some of my issues maybe helped you guys to work through some of issues you might have making your own games. And that's my journey so far. I'm not sure what video I'm going to have for you next week, but I'll figure it out, and it might be another devlog, or it might be just a general tips and tricks video. Who knows? Thanks to everybody who's been subscribing and being supportive. It seems like a lot of you watch my shorts, and so far this is sort of the format that I guess I'm going to do, a long form video, and I'll kind of cut that up into shorts, and it sort of seems to be working out. So anyways, this is Neon Dream Games signing out. You can say hi to Neon at the end. Until next time.
Thanks for checking out Neon Dream Games channel. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you can stay up to date on all the latest videos we have to offer. Don't forget to leave a comment to suggest what kind of videos you'd like to see more of in the future. See you in the next video.